Welcome back to The Circle, the podcast where we go all in on men's work, embodiment practices, and personal growth from our queer perspective. If you're enjoying the show, please be sure to share your favorite episode, leave a review, and subscribe. And if you have a question about anything you've heard us talk about, please send us a note. We'd love to hear from you. And now on to today's show. Today we ask, what happens when we take sex out of the center of our conversations about identity, attraction, and intimacy? In this episode of The Circle, we welcome Hannah O'Rourke, a yoga teacher and early childhood care provider who identifies as asexual, to help us explore a topic that's often misunderstood, even within queer spaces. Together, we unpack the nuances of the asexuality spectrum, the difference between romantic and sexual orientation, and how asexuality challenges our assumptions about what it means to be queer. Tim, Hannah, are you ready to go all in?
Absolutely.
I'm ready.
Let's do this. Well, first of all, Hannah, welcome to The Circle. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And so I'm just wondering, can we start with just sharing a little bit about your personal journey and how you came to identify as asexual and what that process was like for you?
Yeah. So I probably started to identify as with the label of asexual probably around 23, 24. But looking back, I realized that that has been my identity my whole life. I just didn't have the vocabulary or the language to understand that that is what it was. So yeah, I would say that it's like a little bit, realizing this about yourself in more of a finite way at an older age. Not that 23 is old, but just, having had pretty good amount of life experience under my belt by that point, it definitely was a big shift in perspective, while also being really comforting, actually, to sort of be like, okay, this is the why behind so many of these questions I've had growing up and in my experiences, but just I didn't have any language or awareness of that space.
Yeah. Could you bring us into some of those questions that you had been asking yourself?
Yeah. So, for me, when I started dating, I was around 14, 15. And while I felt, intense romantic attraction and attachment to my high school boyfriend, I also was aware that that was the thing I was the most interested in. And while sex was part of my life, I kind of always was a little bit like, it felt like a means to an end. Now, granted, I was a teenager flooded with teenage hormones. And I think what some people don't understand with asexuality is it's not as though, those nerve endings, that anatomy doesn't work, right? It's not the same as a medical issue with that. So it was a little confusing because while I would feel the pull to engage in sexuality with my boyfriend, there was always just something about it where at a certain point I was like, okay, this is kind of boring. Like I'd rather skip to the end and we can like cuddle and talk and like go for a walk and hang out together. So it was just a little bit, I wouldn't have been able to describe it back then, but it always felt a little bit like almost like performative. Like I was aware because obviously growing up in the 2000s, I mean, there's been peaks and valleys, but it was one of the heights of like female kind of patriarchal viewpoint, right? Like you can remember like the Victoria's Secret fashion show and
Christina, Britney, the low-rise jeans that were below the hips,
that were basically exposing your crotch.
Yes.
And it was like this whole thing about, you want to appeal to the male gaze. That is how you are validated. That's how you know your worth of something, was to have the adoration or the attention of men, or, in my case, when I was that age, of boys. So yeah, it was just sort of like, it felt as though I was checking a box. It felt as though I was sort of like, okay, like, he desires me sexually, therefore I'm valid. And that's what I would get out of it, is a feeling of validation, not realizing that for other people, it was actually more of a mutual endeavor. So that was sort of like something that I couldn't ever articulate back then. But now, knowing what I know, I'm able to look back and say, oh, the reason why it was almost like, okay, like I go to my boyfriend's house, we hang out, we have fun, we have sex, and then we get to like actually have fun together. So it wasn't that it wasn't like that. It wasn't that it was non-consensual or anything like that. It was just that it was almost like I was missing a part of the script.
So I'm really curious. Thank you for sharing that. You know, as a young queer person, I remember at a certain age, there was a lot of conversation amongst the boys about sex and sexual desire and things you want to do or things that you may have done. And I'd be curious if you're open to sharing a little bit about what you were hearing from your contemporaries and how that felt different. Because I have to imagine it was giving you some clues that, oh, something here is not quite the same. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So kind of interestingly, whether or not it was the particular boyfriend I had at that time and whatever was influencing him, which, you know, back in that day also was like the heyday of like, I mean, not heyday, but internet porn was like just kind of becoming readily available, right?
Phones were getting bigger again.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like all of a sudden, like, you know, back then it was not even phones, but it would be like, you know,
Napster.
Yeah,
and-
exactly. Exactly.
You were on the peer-to-peer sharing networks, downloading porn and all the upcoming websites.
Yeah, and it was kind of a new frontier. Like at this point, it's so oversaturated and it's so like, yeah, everyone has seen everything and it's whatever. But back then it was a little more new. And so I think that was influencing his behavior. And so when I would talk with my best friend, who was also in a sexual relationship with her boyfriend, or just in general with peers, there was always this point where they would say like, oh, you know, we did fill in the blank. And I'd be like, yeah, like that's so duh, like that's so boring. Like the stuff that my boyfriend and I were doing, looking back, was probably more the word.
Hardcore.
Yeah, it was probably more intense than the average teenage sexual experience. But it didn't resonate that way for me because honestly, all of sex kind of felt the same as like, checking a box. Yeah. And so it didn't have any impact. Like my friend would be like, oh my God, my boyfriend, you know, wants to try anal. And I'm so nervous about that. Oh my God, I don't think like, what are the implications of that? And I was like literally, like, have you washed your hair before? like, dude, it means nothing. It didn't nothing had any attached meaning for me. So I did start to kind of clue in and be like, oh, these things that hold weight, emotional weight, and meaning to my peers, I'm just kind of looking around like, yeah, and? Like, and mm-hmm. Like, what do you mean? What does that mean? It literally means just what it is. Mm-hmm. So I kind of started to get clued in to be like, oh, okay, like my view on sex is a bit different than my friends. But at the time, because women were kind of praised for being hypersexual at that point, I was just like, oh, you know, I'm just more mature than they are. I'm just, you know, I just have a better handle on myself. In fact, my narrative is I'm just a very highly evolved sexual person. I'm very sexual. And that's why all of this stuff is par for the course.
Because that was probably the language that was available at that time.
Exactly. That really was. There was no, in terms of especially like female sexual identity, it was either are men choosing you as a sexual partner, therefore you're legitimate and you're a valid person, or it's are you able to please men and keep them, you know, engaged with you and not wanting to go elsewhere for stuff. And there really wasn't any focus on what is your internal, as a woman, what's your internal experience with sex? So because there wasn't any attention to that, I never asked myself the question. And I just sort of was like, oh yeah, this is totally just like, you know, State of the Union. It's all all as it is.
I'm really interested in what you just said around like the internal feeling around sex. Mm-hmm. And if you're open to it, letting us into your felt experience around what does romance feel like in your body versus what does sex feel like? Totally.
So for me, romance in my body, and I'm not the most romantic or sentimental person. I do experience romantic attraction, but I'm not like if my husband is going to do something romantic for me, it's not going to be like, oh, I got you flowers and jewelry. It's going to be like, I cleaned the whole kitchen.
Oh, acts of service.
Top to bottom. It is sparkling. And I'm like, oh my God, that is so touching. I feel so cared for. I feel so seen.
I also love an act of service.
Yeah,
so
it's just, it's a little bit more of that to me. But that being said, for me, that is romantic.
Yeah.
So romance feels to me like butterflies, or the feeling of like, oh my God, like I'm so seen and cared for as a human, of I'm appreciated.
Right.
Whereas sex, like I always say, if I'm trying to explain asexuality to people, I'm like, have you ever had someone like maybe you know them kind of well enough that when they see you, they give you a hug? And you don't think twice about that. You just give them that little, hey, how are you hug? And that's it. And to me, it's like, that's kind of an equivalent of how sex feels in my body, which is like, I'm aware that I'm hugging you. I'm aware that we're doing this. It's fine. I've said, yes, I'm comfortable to it. But that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot else going on.
It's a really helpful description. Thank you.
I'm actually really impressed because I feel like in the gay male community, we value sex so much, but I think a lot of that has to do with, I'll speak for myself. It was a means of validation. It was a means of feeling safe, all this stuff. And I wonder how many of us could as clearly describe our embodied experience of sex as the one you just described. And of course, in embodiment practice, one of the main things that we do is start to try to listen and create a conversation with our own physical body and our sensations so that we can tap into these centers of wisdom and sort of bring everything online. You just described it in what seemed like a very thorough, understood way. And I'd be curious to know if we like went on the street right now, like, what is your embodied experience of sex for people who are having a lot of it and seeking a lot of it? I would be curious to know how fluent they would be in the language of sensation around this topic. Right.
And it is an interesting thing because, as I said before, it's like, unless you have a medical condition where you are unable to feel physically, objectively, sex feels good, right? And so for me, it's like, it was never like it was physically painful or uncomfortable. It was like, yeah, okay, this feels good. But it, it's similar to like, oh, I went and got a pedicure and they rubbed my feet and that felt good too. Like that's kind of for me. And so with other people, I always kind of not relating to the other side of it. I am curious, like, does sex feel like connecting of souls? Does it feel like a merging of two entities? Is it more just in the physical tactile realm? Is it more in the heady emotional realm? And I'd be curious to know that answer too. And I do kind of wonder how many people have taken the time to actually be like, okay, beyond the fact that it physically feels good, what else am I experiencing?
Yeah, I would say I think it can be all of the things that you mentioned. And I think it depends on context and the person. As I'm getting older, I find that an emotional attachment is really the thing that makes it extra hot. So as you kind of said, well, sure, we can go through the motions and kind of like push some buttons if we want, like for me, that's, but I identify as a demisexual, which I believe is in the slice of asexuality. I'm pretty sure that's right. We could Google it. And so for me, it's like, that's really the thing.
Yeah.
And without that, it still happens. Like it can still be fine, but then it's missing something for me.
Totally. And I'll share, I asked his permission prior to this, but my husband also identifies as demisexual. So one of the things that when we were first dating and getting to know each other, you share stories, you get to know each other. And I would talk about having like one night stands or whatever. And he'd be like, I've never had one of those. And I remember being like, I mean, come on, there's no way. Like you can be honest with me. I'm not going to judge you. And he's like, no, I literally never have. It's not something my body can do. He's like, I have to feel a connection. And he was like, it's not to say that I haven't had sex with people that I wasn't in a relationship with. He's like, but they've always been friends. There has to be some kind of emotional connection. He's like, otherwise, it doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. So yeah, and that is under demisexuals, under the umbrella of asexuality.
I thought so. Yeah.
Yes.
I got that. Well, so I'm also curious if we can stay here for a second. You talked about sex can feel good. The foot rub also felt good, but it occurs to me like there might be an assumption that if you're asexual, it's kind of disgusting. And that's not what I'm hearing. So my first question is that an experience that you like bump into a lot? And how do you communicate around that?
Yeah. So, within asexuality is sort of, think of it as an umbrella. And then within it is, as we talked about, demisexual, graysexual, like there's all these kind of like little categories within asexuality. And one of those categories is, I forget the like actual name. I think I wrote it down somewhere, but it's basically sex repulsed. So for some people, that is their experience. Sex, what I've read, is that sex can almost like, imagine something that would sensory wise just overwhelm you. So for me, that would be walking through slimy seaweed.
Yeah, that created a visceral.
Right? It's so upsetting. I don't want to think about it. I certainly don't want to do it. And if I had to do it, I would be like, oh my God, oh no, ooh. The whole time would be horrible.
Yeah.
And for people that are identified as sex repulsed, that is for them what that would be. And then there's kind of more people like myself that are not, I don't want to say indifferent, because I'm not indifferent. It's not my inclination to engage in sexuality. But if, for example, my husband had said, I am just heterosexual and I can't be in a relationship with someone that doesn't have that aspect, I could have worked with that. So there's kind of a whole branch, but for me, I would experience repulsion if I had no vested interest in it at all. So for example, if it was something like, someone was like, oh, I'd like to have sex. And in that moment, I was either feeling overwhelmed, touched out, tired. I wouldn't be able to then say, okay, that's fine. Let's just do it. That would be repulsive to me. But in other past experiences, it's kind of been something where I'm like, if I'm in a space where I'm okay with it, then it's fine. I'm not really going to get anything out of it, but I'm okay with it.
I would be interested. So is there a component of the thing you might get out of it is the offering of something sacred to someone special, someone meaningful?
Yes. It's an act of service to somebody else, right? It's that, you're making them feel good. You're filling their cup, but it really has nothing. It's not a two-way street.
Yeah.
And then I've noticed though, as I've gotten older, I think a lot about this quote that Kim Cattrall from Sex and the City said, which is like, it's like, if I'm not having fun, I don't want to do it for even a moment. And as I've gotten older, that's honestly been more my experience, which is like, I've become less like, oh, like, let me pour into your cup in this way. And luckily, because my husband is also on the asexual spectrum, this works. But I think if I was with someone that expected a heteronormative sexual experience, at this stage in my life, it would breed quite a lot of resentment because it would feel like I have so many other things to give that will make you feel comforted, safe, loved, doted on. It's just not going to be a sexual release. And a little bit, if you need that, like, have at it. You have a hand.
Correct.
You don't need me. And, but it's interesting, like when my husband and I were just dating and I was sort of having this realization about myself, I had the thought where I was like, if I say to him, I'm realizing I'm asexual, and although the sex we have together is enjoyable because I know it's fulfilling for you, doesn't really do a lot for me. And sometimes I can feel almost like burdened by it, because it's kind of like, the same way that if someone was like, oh, like, I'm so overwhelmed by my chores. And you're like, oh, I'll do your laundry for you. And the friend's like, oh, that makes me feel so good. Thank you. But then every week they're like, did you do my laundry? You'd be like, no, fuck off. Like, do your own laundry sometimes. And so my husband, I kind of had this conversation where I was like, this is where I'm at. If this is an issue for you, if it's a deal breaker for you, we can explore other options, other ideas, but this is where I'm at, and I'm not really willing to budge that much. And luckily for him and for me, he was very open to that conversation. But, I think that at this stage in my life, I've given enough in that arena, right. It feels.
I'd love to share a story because I can relate. I think this might be the demisexual in me. I don't know, but I was dating this person, an ex of mine, and I was about to go away for a month to film a movie in North Carolina. I was living in New York City. I was going to go to North Carolina. And my ex, my boyfriend at the time, he was kind of jealous and worried that I was going to be gone. So right before I was leaving, he was trying to have like all the sex, so much sex. And I don't know if I'm like, if the idea is that you're going to sort of give me all the
tire you out,
tire me out. Yeah. So that I don't have this, compulsion later. I'm like, I don't think it really works that way. But I remember the reason I bring it up is I started to feel burdened by it. I'm like, this isn't how I would rather have had one really like sweet magical moment than to try to have 7 like check it off the list kind of moments. And I remember there was a point I was like annoyed because I'm like, this isn't how this is supposed to be in my head, my heart, or my body.
Yes.
And so I can relate to that. Like, well, if I'm going to do it, it's got to be because there's something in it for me. And if what's in it for me is just
validating you.
Yeah. And like making you feel less jealous. And then also recognizing that isn't how that works.
Yes.
In 2 days from now, I could potentially find someone attractive. I mean, like,
right.
This isn't going to work the way you want it to, but
100%. No, I totally relate to that. And it is that feeling of almost like, I don't know, like if you were caring for someone that was ill and they had like a little bell to ring when they needed you. And it was like, they ring the bell, you bring them a glass of water, you get back to the kitchen. And as you step back in the kitchen, they're like, ding, ding, ding. And you're like, oh my God, like again, like, what do you want? And it's kind of like, exactly. It's sort of like, if there was going to be something in there where you were like, I know you're insecure, let's have this really special moment and reaffirm, get rid of that insecurity, kind of like have that feeling of togetherness to reassure you. That's something where you're like, okay, yeah, I'm willing to give that to you because I care about you. But then beyond that, you're just like, dude, what do you want?
Yeah, exactly.
Full disclosure, I am kind of that person in relation. I'm not that. I am not somebody that can easily go out and hook up, and I do have to have I don't know if it's an emotional connection, but it has to be safe. I have to feel safe with somebody in order for my biology to work. If
Definitely.
I don't feel safe, I'm not getting a boner.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not going to happen. I will be in my head in fight or flight mode, and it's just not going to happen. So I have to have that safety with the person.
Yeah.
And then once I have it, I'm insatiable sometimes. I am that person with the ding, 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 right? Because it is such an intimate moment, because then there might be a moment of greed there coming in of like, oh, I feel so intimate and I feel so safe. I want to hold on to this safety.
Yeah.
And so this is a way that I keep getting my safety met.
Yeah.
Right. Or my intimacy met.
Mm.
And I think for a lot of people, that is the case, that like, there's a lot of, it's, interesting crossover between sexual proclivity and attachment theory.
Mm-hmm.
And how does your personal way of attaching to people play out within that scope? And I think that, but a lot of people, as you just said, you can identify, I need to feel emotional connection. But then once I feel that, it's so wonderful. It's so great that I just want to re-up it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think but that's like a question you have to ask yourself. I think a lot of people, if they were to say, people that would describe maybe their sex life as being unfulfilling or not what they hope it would be, my question to them would be like, well, what are you hoping to get out of it? Because if you're just, as a culture, we're so hypersexualized that I think it's just like, well, I don't know, I'm hoping to get sex out of it. And it's like, okay, but like, if you're not feeling fulfilled or satisfied by that experience, what's missing? Right. And like for me, when I asked myself what's missing, the answer was, I just don't care about this. And what you were saying about like having to have a sense of safety or whatever, interestingly enough, like for me, I didn't need to feel safe, quote unquote. I mean, I needed to feel like the person wasn't going to kill me or like, that I wasn't like, the Craigslist killer's next victim.
Yeah.
But it really, because there was no deeper meaning to sex for me other than the physical act. Like I said, like when my husband was like, you've had one night stands. I'm like, well, yeah. Like,
have you hugged somebody today?
Yeah, exactly. Like, have you said, hey, on the street to somebody? Like, I don't need to feel, because sex is just that. It is a physical exchange for me. And because there is no deeper emotional impact or meaning, I don't need to feel a connection to the person on any kind of level other than physically, I think you're attractive. But even then, that's kind of like where I've explained to people before, where people like, so you don't find people, if you're asexual, you don't think people are attractive. I'm like, oh no, I absolutely experience attraction. But for most people, the order of operations would be, you see someone who you think is hot. You have that rush of hormone and emotion. You think, oh my God, I really want them to notice me or talk to me. I want to flirt with them. I want to get that validation and I want to be in the presence of someone I find attractive. And then for most people, then they'd say, and I'd like to then get to know them better and have sex with them and get to know their bodies. For me, it's like, oh, they're really attractive. Like it would be fun to flirt with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it stops. The process does not continue. It can if I decide it will, but there's nothing biological in me that's like, wants that.
Well, this is really interesting because I feel like you're shedding a light. We talk about the way that we prioritize sex, the way that we think about sex. And I would argue, and especially with porn, I think we think about sex as it's supposed to be this really big, explosive moment. And not just explosive with regards to orgasm, but that too. Mm-hmm. But like it usually has an ending, but it's like this super heightened. And I don't think there's a very robust conversation happening about how sex evolves in a long-term relationship. And
Good
so
point.
I think there needs to be that. And so how can sex be different? Well, I think first and foremost, sex not always having to be explosive, energetically even.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't always have to culminate in an orgasm, right?
Some of the best sex I've ever had didn't have an orgasm, right? Like some of the best sexual experiences is that I can remember, no orgasm involved.
Yeah.
And I think it can open up like a lot of possibility to different kinds of sexy.
Totally.
I will tell a quick story that this is not a sex story, but I was in did I tell you? If I told this already, I'm sorry, but I was in a partnered naked yoga class that I had never gone to in New York City. And I was with my friend and he and I had been intimate prior to then. But we were doing, it was a yoga class, so we weren't there to have sex, but it was very flirty, it was very touchy, and so at the end when we left, we walked down to put our clothes on, we walked downstairs, and we kind of looked at each other and be like, well, it would be really fun to go home and hook up now and sort of close this, but we both were like, but actually this was so interesting and unique. Why don't we just leave it? And we did, and it's one of the moments that I think about because it was a totally different kind of sexy than anything I had had before. And I think there's a benefit in talking about lots of different kinds of sexy.
Definitely.
Deeply intimate, right? Like it sounded like a very intimate.
I liked him. I trusted him. We were being tactile. We had some parameters. So, and it was a totally different kind of interaction.
Right. And it kind of like, can we take sex out of intimacy?
Right.
Can we be intimate with people without sex?
I mean,
and something that I was really hearing when I was talking to you is the depth of your intimacy really is based off of heart energy and depth of conversational connection.
Yes, an emotional connection.
Yeah, because some of the conversations that I heard you talk about that you have had with your husband before you guys got married, I was like, wow, these are like really deep, personal, intimate conversations that I'm hearing.
Oh, definitely. And like when people say that kind of idea of like, can there be intimacy without sex? For me, I'm like, 100%. That's a no-brainer. And it's not just like, the example I gave before, like my husband cleans the kitchen and I feel so special and cared for and whatever, or he, buys me a present that he knows that I've been looking at online and wanted or something. It's also like people assume also, I think a lot of times that asexuality comes with like an immediate link to like not wanting physical touch at all. My husband and I are so physically intimate. We cuddle, we hug. Like I literally, like when we're sleeping, if our dogs aren't in the middle of us, I am like on his back, like a little backpack. Like there's so many ways to be physically intimate that aren't attached to sex. And I think people think of sex as the ultimate, almost like the goal of intimacy. But in my experience, you can 100% remove sex and have not just intimacy, but romantic intimacy with somebody if they're on the same page with you.
Have you ever seen the movie The Opposite of Sex?
I haven't.
It's got Christina Ricci. It has Lisa Kudrow and some other
two of my favorites.
There's some. It's a really interesting, and I think it came out in the 90s. And anyway, there was this one conversation. One of the characters said, "What if sex isn't about procreation? What if it's about concentration?" Right, and like this moment of, so rather than, oh, I'm gonna have a physiological experience with you, he was sort of suggesting, well, what if it's just about two people coming together? And then if that was one way of defining it, then that could exist in all kinds of ways that wouldn't necessarily require certain kinds of stimulation or penetration or it's like, oh, if what I'm doing is coming and like giving you my concentration, my full attention, you're doing the same for me.
Yeah.
Then that to me feels like it could expand the definition beyond a certain set of physical acts that have to like fit into this slice.
Absolutely. I mean, when you were saying that, it made me actually think of a former partner that I had, and he had been going through a very tough time in his life, and he had been away for about 2 months. When he finally came home, I remember very, very specifically, we had this, reunion. I'd missed him so much. We'd lived together. It had been very hard to be apart. And we were having sex. And I remember, though, having this moment where I was like, this is so lovely. We're so connected. I've missed him so much. I just like feel so, so connected to him. But realizing that if we weren't actually having sex, I would have the same feeling if we were just lying in bed together, if we were just being together, that the sex part was kind of arbitrary in a way. And I think a lot of people, out of an almost knee-jerk reaction, probably think like this is the validating way to say, okay, check, yes, I have an intimate connection with somebody. But it's sort of like, there, as you said, there are so many ways. Intimacy does not, I mean, if you think about just the general idea of intimacy, you can have an intimate relationship with a friend that's completely platonic, but you share a deep level of intimacy with them. It doesn't, so I think we get confused, because if I were to say to someone, oh, your dearest best friend, do you feel an intimate connection? Be like, oh, of course. But that same person, if I were to say, can you experience intimacy without sex? If they're thinking romantically, might not understand that those two things can cross over.
I'm curious, as many queer spaces, this town, Provincetown, centers a lot around sexual liberation. What has it been like navigating those spaces, this town, as somebody who doesn't necessarily truly connect with that?
So it's interesting. I think, speaking from my own perspective, some asexual people, if they've realized that this is who they are early on, they might never have had sex. They might never have had any kind of sexual encounter. For myself, that's not true. Having realized it a little bit later on, I've definitely had a lot of experiences. And so in a way, I can relate, right? If someone tells a funny story or a joke, it's not as though I'm like, wow, like that's a foreign alien concept to me. I'm like, oh, that is funny. Like I can relate to that. Where it does become a little bit, not even alienating, but it does kind of make you feel other, is when that is the sole focus of everything. And people also assume, they assume you're a person who's partnered with somebody, so they'll assume that means sexual stuff. And so there's definitely been times when someone will make and it's all in fun, but like a joke about like, oh, like say I was at the gym, like, oh, like, your husband's gonna be happy to see you later or something like that. And I just sort of smile and say, oh, I'm not going to get into it with perfect strangers, but there is sort of this assumption, if you're happy and you're partnered, that you're having sex. So there are times when I either just gloss over it, or I say, oh, yeah, for sure. Or, some just kind of, it's easier just to sort of
placate.
Yeah, to placate. But it does sometimes leave you feeling a little bit like, the cheese stands alone. Like, so, but I would also say that Provincetown being it's a, queer town for sure. But if you look at, like, for example, if you look at our US Census, it's, I think, I forget the percentage, but way more percentage of men than there are women. So it's kind of like female sexuality in P-Town is on the back burner anyway. I would say the exception of like, you walk past Toys of Eros and you have good representation, right? There's stuff of all kinds in that window. It's not just about the male experience. But beyond that, like, it's pretty male gazy around here.
Absolutely.
So in a weird way, I kind of like that invisibility, that kind of overlooking of the female sexual experience, whether it's straight, lesbian, whatever. You kind of get to like fly under cover of night in a way, because people aren't that interested in that experience from you anyway.
When you were telling that story, I kind of flashed to Commercial Street, and then I also flashed to like TV shows, and so we have all these ideas of how we have a sexy experience, meaning not a sexual experience, but a sexy, like, oh, so I put on a ball gown, or I put on like this really tight shorts, or the tank top. And so would you be willing to share like ways in which you have that for yourself?
Yeah. So I always joke, I'm an only child, and I'm like an only child in every sense of the word. In that, for me, that feeling of like, oh, I'm going to wear my cutest tank top and like my cutest, shorts or whatever it is, and I'm going to go out. It's pretty much me, myself, and I. So like for me, if I'm going to put on an outfit that I think looks really good, that I feel really sexy in, it has nothing to do with other people finding me sexy. It's about, do I look in the mirror and say, "Ooh, girl, you look so good." Like, it's really, and I say that with everything else, where I'm like, in terms of, I don't have outward competition. If people are like, let's play a pickup game of soccer, I'm like, oh crap. Like, I can't, I don't care. I don't really care at all. But if you were to say, hey, you're going to try and beat your own mile time, then I'm like, heck yeah. Like, let's do this. Previous me, you're fucked. Like, that's where.
But also deeply loved.
Deeply loved, but also like, you're a dumb bitch and I'm going to school you right now. So for me, it really is kind of all inward, which, on the surface sounds a bit narcissistic, but I don't know. It's about having the relationship with yourself first. And like, if I'm wearing a cute outfit and someone goes like, "Hey girl, you look so good," or like someone's like, "Oh my God, you look so hot," it's obviously an ego boost. Everybody, will feel good when you say, or if someone's like, "Oh my God, your body is looking amazing." Like, I'm not gonna be like, "Oh, how dare you?" I'm like, "Thank you." But I could have 100 people tell me that I've never looked better. And if I look in the mirror and I don't feel that way, it means nothing to me. That external validation kind of rings super hollow. And sometimes I wish it would be more powerful, right? Because people who are like, "Oh my God, you look so good." And if I could actually be like, "Oh, thank you. That has actually made me feel that way," it would be a lot easier, I feel sometimes.
It's fascinating. I'm feeling a little envious, because it does feel like when you're connected to it, I mean, you said it's potentially narcissistic, or it sounds like that, but it also sounds like a lot of conscious self-love, and be like, "Oh, I'm the compass on this experience." And that sounds refreshing. It's like, oh, if I could just like my outfit and walk down Commercial Street and not need anything from anyone else, I mean, sign me up. That sounds, I'm like, and obviously I try to do that, but of course I then will wonder, did they notice me because of all of my programming and the way I'd get validation? And what you're saying, you look in you're passing a window and you see your reflection, and that fills you up. I'm like, that sounds great. Like, first of all, I'm so happy for you. Let's walk down Commercial Street together in some cute tank tops and shorts, and like see if it'll rub off on me. But like, it sounds like really self-love, and it sounds like when you can tap into it, a really comfortable, stable experience.
Definitely. And it's funny, like, that when you're describing that, like, I'm always a bit self-conscious, where I'm like, when I walk down the street, car window, shop window, I'm like, "Oh, hey girl, like, you look so good today." And it's like, but I truly get that kind of that feeling of whoo that you would get if someone else said that to you. And like I said, obviously, if someone else pays me that kind of compliment, I like it. It makes me feel good. It definitely gives me fluffs my feathers a little bit. But at the end of the day, if I felt like if I wasn't feeling that way and someone said it, it does nothing for me. It's almost like I'm like, yeah, but I don't believe you, so it doesn't matter. It is all very centered in yourself.
Right. If the experiences don't line up. Right?
Yes.
If my internal experience is telling me one thing and you're trying to tell me another, like they don't match. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's not doing it.
It means nothing in that case. Yeah, very much so. But, and it, as I, like, when I say it sounds narcissistic, it, in a way, it's kind of like, we can think about things as like, a healthy amount of ego versus an unhealthy amount. And I honestly think for myself, like, it's not as though I don't see myself in the mirror and say, "Oh, you look so good today," and then think, "And you're better than everyone else." Right. That would be the narcissism, right?
Right?
It's more that it's just like, I am my own, my most important person is me. And I think growing up as an only child in kind of a rural place, I had to be my most important person. When I would play with my toys, I was the only one there. So I had to make sure I cultivated a really rich inner life, a really rich inner connection. And I think that is partly why being asexual, for me at least, it doesn't affect my self-esteem. I've read on lots of forums, people who are like, I feel so ashamed. I feel like, what's wrong with me? But because it feels authentic to me and it matches up, then I don't question it.
For somebody that might be questioning if they are asexual or they might be feeling shame around their identity, what's one thing that you would want them to hear?
You are no less valid, an adult, a person. It's not that you have less to contribute if you don't resonate with sex. For me, once I started getting older and those teenage hormones started to wear off and I wasn't kind of able to use them as a nice veil to distract me from my actual experience, it was this moment where I was like, oh gosh, like something's wrong with me. If what adult isn't interested in sex, what mature human doesn't want sex, doesn't get something out of it? I must have Peter Pan syndrome. There's something wrong with me. But I would just want everyone to, if they're thinking like, why doesn't sex make me feel any particular way? Or even if it's like, why do I feel repulsed by it? Sex has been put on a pedestal in our culture and in our, society, but it's not real. It's just not real at all. And you're no less valid at fill in the blank, adult, spouse, person, if that's not part of it for you. And I think a lot of people think, oh, arrested development, or even a lot of the feedback when you say you're asexual is like, oh, what happened? Oh, like what happened to you? And it's like, nothing happened. For some people, asexuality can be born from a trauma response. But to me, how is that any different than somebody who's like, oh, I was married to a female who's like, I was married to a man and it was such a horrible, toxic relationship that I don't ever want to date men again. I want to date women. Whether or not that person was born a lesbian or if their environmental influences have made them have more proclivity towards that, we don't question it. We don't say like, oh, but like maybe give men another try. So it's kind of just one more time, maybe it'll work. It's kind of like, this is just as valid as any other person saying, this is my sexual boundary. This is my experience.
It's fascinating that you said that. It flashed to, I'm talking all about my exes, but I had another ex I was celebrating the New Year, and he was telling his story about coming out. And he came out to his twin brother and his dad. And the dad said to him, he's like, well, have you ever been with a woman? And he said, no. He's like, well, then how do you know that you're gay if you've never been with a woman? And his response was, he was like, well, did you have to be with a woman to know you wanted to be? So it's interesting, like the moments where we will question things and the moments when we won't, because it's like, right, no one, you knew you were straight before you had straight sex.
Right.
But now you're going to ask me, and it's like, oh, because there's a part of me you don't understand, which is fine. Part of what we're trying to do is create understanding, but it's an interesting thing to have to manage. Answering a question lots of people never have to answer.
And it's also, as you said, it's also managing people's expectations, and it's hard to say how accurate this is, but and because asexuality is somewhat new in terms of being a open concept, but I think right now it's saying that 1%, maybe slightly less of the population identifies as asexual. And that's tiny, right? 1%. But a little bit, I'm kind of like, well, if you were to rewind to 1920 and you were to pull how many men identify as gay, it would have been significantly less than now because it just wasn't talked about. It wasn't verbalized. It wasn't seen as even an option. And so a little bit, I sort of think about that where it's like, how many people, if you really stop to think about it, would say, maybe you don't identify as full stop asexual, but on that spectrum, as you said, where you're like, wait a minute, I don't want to just hook up with random guys. I need to have a physical connection or else it won't work. And it's kind of like if you were to, within whether you're straight, gay, whatever, I think it's interesting, like, yeah, it's 1%, but how many people actually, if they had the understanding, would be like, oh, actually, I resonate a bit with that.
Well, I mean, I just discovered the term demisexual like not that long ago. So yes, if you had asked me 2 years ago, are you demisexual? I don't know. I probably would have said I would not have identified as such because I didn't know it was a thing.
Or if someone said, do you identify any part of you as being asexual? You would have said, well, no, I have sex with partners, so I'm not asexual.
Yeah, I would. No, that's even more well said. Yes, that's exactly right. And then it was a discovery. So the understanding and the language around it helps us. And I think you're right. The more we understand it, the more we might recognize a shared experience.
Right. And I'll say that, I had the privilege of, because I have had a sexual past, nobody could challenge me with like, well, but you haven't tried it, so how do you know? In fact, I'd be like, oh, like, trust me, I have enough experiences to know.
Do you want to see my lipstick case?
Literally, like, no need to ask if I'm uninformed. I'm very well informed. So I feel, lucky that never was questioned in that regard. But I will say that, for example, it was just in the last couple years that I started actually, when you go to your doctor and says, how do you identify? All of a sudden, asexual pops up on the menu. And so this was probably like 5 years ago or so. And I thought, oh my gosh, like there I am. That's so cool. Like I'm going to check it off because previously I've always just put straight because I'm married to a man. And it's just like, that's easiest. When I went to that doctor's appointment, she was like, oh, and I noticed you marked asexual. And I was like, oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Like kind of expecting it not to be anything. And she's like, well, basically she went down this rabbit hole of like, do you think there's something medically wrong with you? Oh. Like, are you able to feel aroused? And I'm like, well, yeah, but that's not the point. And it's like, well, okay, like, oh, I noticed you're on an SSRI. That's probably behind a culprit. That's a part of why you don't feel sexual attraction. It's like, no, this sort of like needing to find a reason for the behavior. Just similarly how, for gay men way back, I mean, not actually, sadly, not way back when, very recently. In fact, it's almost like, oh, like like when you were a kid, did something happen? Is there a mental reason, a psychological reason? It's like, not at all, bitch. Like, right. Like, are you kidding me? So, but there is sort of that feeling of people don't, because there's not a lot of verbiage out there for it. Even medical professionals are kind of looking for the why, because it seems strange for most people. The idea that sex means nothing is very foreign.
Well, to take a thing that we have so glamorized in our world and that we've all sort of silently agreed is the most important thing or one of the most important things, and then suddenly you meet a person who isn't impacted in the same way. Yeah, it's like there's not enough understanding. There is an episode of The Big Bang Theory. Have you watched The Big Bang Theory?
A little bit, yeah.
With Sheldon. It's one of my favorite TV shows, but Sheldon was talking to Penny and he was talking about sexual attraction. He's like, and then this for sexual attraction, assuming you're afflicted with such. It was like this laugh line. Of course, the character of Penny was like, okay, because she was like beautiful and had lots of boyfriends and whatever. Mm-hmm. But it was really funny because it was just like, oh, they made the joke about switching the perspective. And from him, it wasn't like that he was missing anything. Yeah. He was like, instead, you're burdened.
Yeah,
you're all burdened by a thing
right?
that I'm not burdened by, and that's why it was such a big laugh line too. Because
the doctor should be asking you these questions.
Yeah, and that's so interesting too. Because I'm an observer. I'm definitely that person at a party who's sitting there watching everybody, and it just that's kind of humans interest me in that way. I love people watching, and so it's funny. I'll when I work out at the gym here. And if I'm like taking a rest or I'm between something and I'll look around and it'll be like, a guy who has like, he's holding a dumbbell, but he's not doing anything because he's just like staring at this other guy way across the gym. It's like he's frozen in time, right? And it's like you were in the middle of a curl and then you were like, and now you're just off thinking whatever you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I often have this thought where I'm like, oh, what a bummer to be so easily distracted from
the present moment.
Yeah, from the present moment by this kind of amorphous concept. And that's always been something that for me is interesting, where it's like, I forget what it's like, the study, it's people think about sex a certain cadence a day, right? If it's like every few minutes or something. I almost never do, especially not provoked. It's not something that I'm just sitting there and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, bam.
Sex.
Yeah, just doesn't happen. And so from my perspective, it is like, wow, like how much of your time goes to thinking about that? Do you want it? Are you getting enough of it? What does it mean if you're not? How, like all
is
of
it with
these,
the right person?
Is it with the right person?
Do the
Could
right
it be better? All of these things where I'm just like, oh, wow, that would take up so much mental effort and energy that I just don't spend on that at all.
So again, it sounds like kind of a luxury.
I mean, in a sense, like, I actually, once I became comfortable with the idea of it, because at first I wasn't like, when and in my own way, I feel like I, came out as asexual in the sense that I always, like, my behavior was always kind of in alignment with asexuality, but my mind wasn't. And I hadn't accepted it about myself because I bought into the rhetoric that if you're an adult that doesn't enjoy sex, something is wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
I really resonate with the like, oh, and if you're afflicted by that, because it's like, wow, yeah, like before, now that I understand it, now that I've had a lot of thought about it, I actually feel immensely lucky that that's not something that distracts me or that preoccupies too much space in my head. If I'm, not getting laid, it doesn't say anything about me. I don't care. Like I'm not thinking like, oh God, it's been 8 months. I must be getting hideous. That's why it's happening. I'm so horrible and gross. It's like, I don't spend any energy on that whatsoever.
Wow.
Because what I love so much about this conversation is the permission that this label can give to folks, and also almost the permission that you've given me to take some of that energy that I direct so outward into the world and really bring it home. Because RuPaul says it, like, how the hell are you going to love somebody else if you can't love yourself?
Yes.
And this is such a beautiful example of that, of like how much time we do spend seeking external when some of that could be directed internal. And there's no right or wrong here, right?
No, there's not.
It's going to be different for each person, and each person is going to have their own fulfillment, just like you do.
Yeah.
Right? Your sense of intimacy is very different than somebody else's sense of intimacy.
And I really love that RuPaul quote. And there's another Oscar Wilde, and I don't remember the exact quote, but it's the relationship you have with yourself is the most important one of your lifetime. And that really resonates for me. And in fact, when I realized, oh, it's not just that I'm lukewarm on sex or that I don't really get it, like, oh, this is actually like the label does give me a feeling of permission. It was a feeling of like, almost as though like I had this moment, I was like, I'm so sorry I've been making you perform in ways that weren't real for you. I'm so sorry that I was putting an agenda on you, didn't mean anything to you. And now that I know that, it was a much better connection with myself.
I'm about to cry because I'm like, I need to do that with my body. I need to like apologize hardcore to my body for all of the pressure and situations that I've put myself through to try to be something, do something. Right? Like, I'm sorry, but I love you just the way you are.
And you know what? You don't know what you don't know till you know it. And so while I was saying, I'm so sorry that I put us in situations that weren't authentic to us, I didn't know better at the time. And now that I know better, I will do better. And for me, that's been such a affirming thing.
And it sounds like it was a valid part of your journey in coming to the understanding.
Definitely.
Right. So rather than going back and like, now you can say, well, what I can do is make an empowered choice moving forward about what is authentic to me.
Right.
And not, because I mean, I think this is important with a lot of like going back and kind of healing our inner children, not beating ourselves up for not being the person we would be now, then, but rather just like, oh, well, that happened. And now what? Like, what have I learned? And now what? honoring that happened,
Yeah.
then maybe it won't happen anymore. Or if it does happen again, it's going to happen differently because I have greater understanding and I can make more conscious choices about it in the greatest good for all involved.
Yeah. And when you say inner child, I really think about how the way I interact with my inner child is I think about my adult self now. And for the record, I had fantastic parents. My mom and dad are amazing. They were so supportive and loving. I'm very privileged to say I have no complaints about how I was raised or my parents' relationship with me. But when I think about my inner child, what I think about is those moments, say when I was 15 and I was hooking up with my high school boyfriend and I felt like this is kind of weird. I feel kind of uncomfortable, but not enough to stop it, but just something's not right. Now I can show up for her. And as the adult self, it's almost like I'm not reparenting, but I'm like the big sister I didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And so now if I feel myself being like, oh, I should probably, like if I'm in a group where we're all talking about sex, I'm like, oh, I should share something, even though it doesn't feel authentic. I almost picture like myself now putting my hand on the shoulder of my younger self and saying, that's okay. You don't have to. You're valid in the conversation just as is. You don't have to. And it's very affirming.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for sharing this time with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing your experience to us, the vulnerability that you brought and the intimacy that we were able to create through that. I'm feeling very, very complete. How about you, Tim?
I feel complete.
I love that.
Anna, you feel complete?
Definitely. This was a lovely conversation.
Thank you. Tim, will you take us out, please?
Absolutely. Let's draw our spine tall, close our eyes, or lower our gaze, and just bring a lot of appreciation and gratitude for this conversation and for any awarenesses or insights or understandings that may be of service to you, to us, to our community. And now we release the spirits that we called in, and with these words, our container is open but not broken. Aho.
Aho.